The inverted night. It was just another night under the stars. A simple camping trip to escape the chaos of daily life. The four of us, Nathan, Sally, Monica, and I, were gathered around the campfire, its warmth pushing back the cool night air. We were relaxed, unwinding after a day of hiking, and enjoyed our moment together. Nathan was in the middle of telling one of his usual ghost stories, something about the haunted trail in these woods. He had a way of spinning tales that made you feel like you were right there in the middle of them, even if you know they weren't true. But tonight, I wasn't really listening. My mind kept drifting as I stared into the fire, watching the embers float up into the darkness. It was peaceful, almost hypnotic in this clear night. But suddenly, I noticed something strange. Stars. They were moving, not drifting across the sky as they should, but falling, slowly descending toward the earth. I blinked, thinking it might be some trick of eyes, but when I looked again, they were still there, closer now, like they were being pulled down by some unseen force. "Hey, does the sky look off to you guys?" I called out, confused. The others looked up, and for a moment, none of us said anything. We just stared, our minds struggling to process what we were seeing. The stars were falling, not like shooting stars, but as if this entire sky was collapsing in on us. What is happening? Monica voiced the question in all of our minds. Sally tried to laugh it off, saying it might be some rare astronomical phenomenon, but I could tell she was just uneasy as the rest of us. We sat there, paralyzed by the surreal sight above, watching as the stars continued their impossible descent. But the worst was not yet to come. Our dread exploded into a full-blown panic as the sky and ground switched places. One moment we were sitting around the campfire, trying to make sense of the stars falling towards us, and the next, the world was turning itself inside out. It was like the earth had been flipped upside down, and we were caught in the middle of some horrifying, impossible nightmare. I remember the feeling of my stomach lurching as gravity seemed to lose its grip on us. The stars, now beneath our feet, shimmered like a distant, otherworldly ocean. The ground beneath us became the sky, a vast, dark expanse, stretching above our heads. Trees once rooted in solid earth twisted and contorted as they reached down toward the stars. The campfire flickered and warped, its flames curling upward, defying the laws of nature. "This isn't real. This can't be real," Nathan muttered, more to himself than any of us, but we all heard the tremor in his voice. I stumbled backward, my mind raced for any explanation. There was none. The disorientation was overwhelming. Every step I took felt like walking through molasses. My movements sluggish and uncoordinated. We were trapped in this inverted world, with no way to know if there was an end, or if we would be stuck here forever, suspended between the stars and the earth, in a reality that made no sense at all. The others were just as lost as I was, their faces pale, and their eyes wide with fear. "Stay together," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising panic in my chest. "Whatever this is, we can't get separated." But it was easier said than done. The ground beneath us was buckling and shifting, making it almost impossible to stay upright, let alone move as a group. It felt like we were fighting against an invisible force, one that wanted to pull us apart, drag us deeper into the twisted, inverted world. Suddenly, the fire that had been our only source of light went out. Darkness enveloped us, thick and suffocating. I could hear the others breathing, quick and panic, but I couldn't see them. I reached out blindly, trying to find them, but my hand grasped nothing but air. It was like we were suspended in a void with no up and down, no down, just an endless expanse of twisted shadows and shifting earth. Just when we thought things could get worse, out of the darkness, a figure emerged. He was just a silhouette against the backdrop of stars beneath us. But as he drew closer, his features remained hidden. Shrouded in darkness, he moved in eerie grace, his footsteps silent, as though gravity had no hold on him in his strange inverted world. We all froze, not knowing whether to run or confront this strange figure. There was something about him, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. He didn't seem entirely human, more like a shadow that had somehow taken on physical form. But there was a presence to him, an air of authority, like he belonged here in a way that we didn't. "Who are you?" Nathan finally managed to ask, his voice tense. The figure tilted his head, considering us before speaking. His voice was like the rustling of leaves in a forgotten forest, soft yet chilling. "I am the guardian of this place," he said, his words echoing the natural silence. "You have entered a realm that is not meant for mortals." I felt the chill run down my spine. The way he spoke made it clear that this was no ordinary man. He was something else, something ancient and powerful, tied to this inverted world. "What is this place?" Monica's voice trembled as she spoke, her fear evident in every word. The guardian turned his shadowed face toward her, and though I couldn't see his eyes, I could feel his gaze, cold and piercing. "This is a place of inversion, a mirror of your world, but flipped. It exists between the stars and the earth, where gravity has no meaning, and time stands still. You're trapped here because you have crossed the boundary that you should never crossed." His words made my head spin. A place of inversion? A mirror of our world? Didn't make sense, but nothing about this place did. The more he spoke, the more it felt like we were slipping further into a nightmare from which we never wake up. "How do we get out of here?" Sally asked, grabbing Monica's arm to hold back her fear. The guardian was silent for a long moment, as we all held our breath. "There is a way," he finally said, "but it is not easy. You must find the point of convergence, where your world and this one intersect. Only there can you hope to restore the balance and return to your reality. But if you fail, you will be trapped here forever, lost in this flipped world." Then without another word, he disappeared like a trail of smoke. His words hung heavy in the air, a dire warning that left us all feeling more hopeless than ever. We exchanged confused and desperate glances, didn't know if we should believe him or not, but we know one thing for sure: we had to move forward. As we walked, the forest around us became even more twisted and hostile. The ground seemed to ripple beneath our feet, making it difficult to keep our balance. The trees groaned, their branches reaching out like hands trying to pull us into darkness. The stars below us flickered, as if they too were being warped by strange forces at play. I can do this," Monica whispered, her voice trembling. I wanted to comfort her, but I wasn't sure we would ever escape this place. Finally, after what felt like hours, we reached our clearing. In the center stood a strange pulsating light, so bright it was almost blinding. This has to be it, the point of convergence. But as we approached, the light began to twist and warp. Just like everything else in this world, the ground trembled beneath our feet, and I felt a deep, gut-wrenching fear that if we stepped into that light, we might never come out. "Let's do this," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the fears in his eyes. We all nodded, knowing this was our only chance. No matter if we could escape or not, it's better than doing it alone. We joined hands, took a deep breath, and stepped into the light. The world around us exploded into chaos. I felt myself being pulled in every direction. My body stretched and compressed as if I were being torn apart. The light was blinding, searing into my mind, filling my head with overwhelming pleasure. I could hear the others screaming, with their voices distant, as if they were miles away. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. I opened my eyes to find myself lying on the ground. The real ground. The one I knew, with the stars where they belonged, high above. We had made it. We were back. But as I looked around at the others, I saw the haunted look in their eyes that I felt in my own. The terror of that night clung to us, a shadow we couldn't shake. The forest was back to normal, but something within us shifted, as if a piece of that twisted world had followed us home. And even though we were back, part of us would always be lost in that night, in that place where the stars touched the ground. The Prophecy of Our Doom. You know how camping trips are supposed to be relaxing? Just you, your friends, and nature. That's what we thought when we decided to camp near this old, rundown radio tower. It was supposed to be a cool spot, isolated, with nothing around but trees and a sky full of stars. Jason and I were setting up our tents. Mia was unpacking some snacks. When Elise wandered off the tower, she always been a curious one, so it didn't surprise us when she called out, saying she found something. We followed her voice and found her standing in this dusty old shed near the base of the tower, staring at a beat-up radio. "Guys, check this out," Elise said, all excited. "I didn't know these things still existed," Jason said, brushing off the dust. He's the tech guy, always into gadgets, so he was the first try to turning it on. "Probably just static," he muttered as he fiddled with the dials. But then, against all odds, the radio crackled to life. I was expecting some old music, or if we were lucky, a weather report. But instead, we heard a man's voice, shaky and urgent, warning about a wildfire spreading nearby caused by a group of campers. Just like us. We all laughed. It had to be some old broadcast, right? So we shrugged it off and decided to go back to our camp. But as we were about to turn the radio off, the voice continued, and what it said made our blood run cold. "The fire spread quickly. The 4 campers who started it, Jason, Elise, Mia, and Lucas, were nowhere to be found. We still don't know if they survived or not." We all froze for a moment. No one could utter a word. Was the radio talking about us? It had just listed all our names. But how was that possible? We hadn't even set up our campfire yet. "This must be some kind of prank," I finally managed to say, trying to make sense of everything. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew something was wrong. We hadn't seen anyone else around, and the signal was too clear for a place this remote. The logical part of my brain was struggling to find an explanation, but the rest of me was gripped by a cold, creeping fear. Mia shook her head, as if she's trying to shake it off the fear. "It's gotta be a coincidence. Maybe there's another group out here with the names." But deep down, I knew none of us believed that. The odds of hearing exactly four or our names were astronomical. Elise hesitated. A flicker of some wild tea flashed in her eyes. What if it's not a coincidence? What if this thing is actually telling us what's going to happen? That's crazy, Jason snapped, shaking his head profusely as if chasing away the thought. This radio's ancient, covered in dust, and clearly hasn't been touched in years. There's no way it can predict the future. My mind obviously agreed with him, but there was something tugged at the back of consciousness. We should go, I said, my heart pounding. This isn't funny anymore. We returned to our camp, but the initial laughter was absent. The unease hung over us like heavy fog, making each task feel burdensome. By the time the sun was dipping below the horizon, we knew we had to set up the fire. But there was no way we'd make it through the night without one. But the thought of lighting that match filled with dread. What if the radio was right? What if we were really about to start a fire that would spiral out of control and consume us all? Finally, Jason stood up and took charge. Let's just be extra careful, okay? We'll keep it small and we'll make sure it's completely out before we go to sleep. We all nodded, silently agreeing, but the tension in the air was thick. Jason carefully stacked the logs. Elise meticulously arranged the stones around the fire pit. Mia kept a vigilant eye on our surroundings, and I double-checked the arrangement. As Jason lit the matches, he had trembled slightly, and I found myself holding my breath. When the fire finally caught, we all stared at it like it was some kind of ticking time bomb. But nothing happened. The fire crackled softly, just as any normal campfire would. The warmth was a relief against the growing chill in the air, and slowly we started to relax. The unease that had gripped us began to fade, replaced by the familiar comfort of the night around the campfire. We started talking again, cautiously at first, then more easily as we realized nothing was going wrong. Maybe it really was just a weird coincidence. Maybe we'd let our imagination get the best of us. As the flames danced and the stars appeared overhead, we all believed that everything was okay, and slowly forget about the creepy voice on the radio. But turned out it was just the calm before the storm. Out of nowhere, a strong gust of wind swept through the trees, rustling the leaves and stirring up the dusk. We all looked up, surprised by the sudden change in the weather. Before we could react, the wind caught some dry leaves on the ground and sent them skittering into the fire. The flames flared up, catching the leaves instantly. Jason jumped into his feet, trying to stomp them out. But the wind was relentless. More leaves were blown into the fire, and within seconds, small sparks were carried into surrounding bushes. No, 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 Mia cried out, grabbing a blanket to try and smother the growing flames. We were all on our feet now, frantically trying to contain the fire that had suddenly grown out of control. But the wind was against us, fanning the flames faster than we could put them out. Jason cursed as he ran to grab the bucket of water we kept nearby. This can't be happening, he muttered, his voice with panic. We were so careful. But it was happening, despite our efforts to be cautious. The fire was spreading, climbing up the dry grass and catching on the low branches of trees. The radio's prediction flashed through my mind as I watched the flames grow, realizing that we were the ones who had caused this, just as the voice had foretold. We need more water, Elise shouted, but it was too late. The fire had taken on a life of its own, fed by the wind and the dry underbush. Every time we thought we had a section smothered, another part would flare up, stronger than before. With the fire raging out of control, we had no choice but to abandon the camp. We grabbed the little we could carry and ran, the fire's roar and choking smoke following into the night. We stumbled over roots and rocks, barely able to see the darkness. My lungs burned from the smoke, and my heart raced in my chest. The fire had spread faster than we could have ever imagined, and now it felt like it was chasing us down, determined to consume everything in its path. We didn't stop until we reached a small clearing, gasping for breath, our clothes covered in ash and sweat. The air hadn't reached the spot yet, but we know it was only a matter of time. We could see the orange glow in the distance, hearing the trees popping and crackling as they succumbed to the flames. "We have to keep moving," I said, my voice hoarse from the smoke and fear. "We can't stay here." "But where can go?" Elise asked, her voice crackling. "The fire's everywhere." Jason was already putting out his phone, but as expected, there was no signal. We were too deep in the woods. He cursed under his breath, frustration and fear etched on his face. "We can't go back," he said. "The fire's already cut us off. We need to find another way out." So we pushed forward. The fire continued to spread, leaping from tree to tree, its flames licking at the night sky. By the time the first light of dawn broke through the smoke-filled sky, we were exhausted, our bodies aching, our minds numb. Finally, we broke through the tree line, stumbling onto a dirt road. I could hear the distant sound of sirens now, a faint but unmistakable wail cutting through the chaos. Someone had seen the smoke or the flames and called for help. But how long would it take them to get here and rescue us? I didn't know, because the exhaustion and the smoke had caught up with me, and I passed out. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, an IV in my arm, and the beeping of machines all around me. My head spun and took it a moment to remember what had happened. My friends were there, their faces pale but relieved when they saw me open my eyes. "You're awake," Mia said, leaning forward. "You've been out for a while." Jason and Elise told me it had taken 3 days to control the fire. The news was calling it one of the worst in recent history. Entire swaths of forest had been destroyed, homes had been evacuated, and it was all because of us. We started it, just like the radio had predicted. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the reality of what we have done, but there was no escaping it. The damage was done, and we have to live for the rest of our lives. As they continued talking, their words blurred in my mind. I kept thinking about the radio, wondering if it was still out there, still broadcasting its eerie predictions to anyone who would listen. Or maybe it was gone now, like everything else we had lost on those flames.
The Shadow Selves. I woke up to the smell of pine and the distant sound of a river flowing somewhere beyond the trees. The sun was just starting to filter through the dense canopy above us, but the birds' chirping had already filled the air. I stretched out of my sleeping bag and saw Becky already up, brewing coffee over the fire. "Morning," she said with a smile, handing me a cup. The warmth felt good in the cool morning air. Isaac and Laura were still asleep, bundled up against the early chill. "Perfect day for a hike," I said, taking a sip of the coffee. It was strong, just the way I liked it. As the others started to stir, we began our usual routine, preparing breakfast, packing our stuff for a hike, and sharing a few laughs about the weird noises we heard during the night. Isaac, as always, blamed it on raccoons, while Laura swore she heard something bigger. It wasn't until we finished packing up that I noticed something glinting in the trees a few yards away. Curious, I wandered over and found an old mirror hanging from a branch. It was cracked and dirty, with a wooden frame that looked like it had been there for decades. "Hey, check this out," I called over my shoulder. We all gathered around, peering at the mirror. Our reflection was warped, stretched in a way that made us look like a funhouse version of ourselves. "Weird place for a mirror," Isaac commented. "Probably just some old junk someone left behind," Laura shrugged. "Bad quality, too. Can barely see ourselves in it." We laughed it off and continued getting ready for the day, not giving it much thought. Just a strange little relic of the woods, we figured. Nothing to worry about. The hike began like any other, with the four of us laughing and enjoying the morning. The trail wound through the tall pines and thick underbrush, occasionally opening up to stunning views of the surrounding mountains. We were in high spirits, chatting and joking, and the strange mirror from earlier were quickly forgotten. As the day wore on, we decided to split up for a bit. Becky and Laura went ahead to scout for a good lunch spot, while Isaac and I lagged behind, taking our time and snapping pictures of the scenery. It was during one of these moments, as Isaac and I rounded a bend, that I noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye. There, standing just off the trail, was me. Or at least, it looked like me. The figure was partially obscured by the trees, but the resemblance was uncanny. Same height, same hair, even the same clothes. But what unnerved me the most were its eyes. Hollow, empty, as if they were black pits where eyes should be. The figure stood motionless, didn't react at all, just staring straight ahead as if it hadn't noticed us. "Isaac," I whispered, nudging him. "Look over there." Isaac followed my gaze, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make out what I was pointing at. When he saw it, he gasped in excitement. "Dude, somebody's made a perfect copy of you. It looks like your twin." I didn't laugh. The figure just stood there, eerily still, its hollow eyes locked onto me. A chill ran down my spine. Something about it wasn't right. It wasn't just the appearance, it was the way it stood there, like it was waiting for something. "This is creepy. Let's get out of here," I muttered, not taking my eyes off the figure. Isaac glanced at me, noticing the serious expression on my face, and his smile faded. He nodded, and we quickly turned back to the trail, walking faster to catch up with Becky and Laura. When we finally reached them, I was out of breath, my mind spinning. Isaac quickly explained what we had seen, but they were skeptical. Becky laughed and dismissed it as some kind of joke, while Laura looked between us, seemingly more concerned. We continued our hike as planned, but I couldn't shake the image of that figure from my mind. After about an hour, we reached a small clearing and decided to stop for lunch. Becky and Laura unpacked the sandwiches, while Isaac and I scouted the area, making sure we were alone. As I was walking along the edge of the clearing, something caught my eye again. Another figure, just beyond the tree line. This time, it was Becky's double, standing motionless in the shadows, her features just visible through the branches. My stomach twisted in fear. "Isaac!" I called out, my voice trembling. He jogged over to where I was standing. His eyes followed mine into the trees. His face paled as he saw the figure, an exact replica of Becky, down to the clothes she was wearing that day. "What the hell?" he whispered, glancing back at the real Becky, who was laughing with Laura by the fire, completely unaware of what we were seeing. I stepped forward, hesitating for a moment before shouting, "Hey, who's there?" The figure didn't move, didn't react in any way, just like before. It stood there, silent and still, its hollow eyes fixed on us. "We need to tell the others," Isaac said urgently. But before we could move, Laura's scream pierced the air. We spun around to see her grabbing Becky's arm tightly, pointing at something across the clearing. My heart sank as I saw it. Her double, emerging from the shadows, its empty eyes locked onto her. Panic set in as we regrouped around the fire. "This isn't possible," Becky stammered, her eyes darting from one of us to the other, as if checking that we were still ourselves. "How can this be happening?" Before we could figure out what to do, the doppelgangers began to advance, stepping out from behind the trees in unison. Then Isaac's double appeared, followed by mine, both emerging from the opposite side of the clearing. We were surrounded. "Run!" Becky screamed. We grabbed our gear and bolted, adrenaline surging as we tore through the forest. I could hear them behind us, our doubles, crashing through the underbrush, relentless in their pursuit. No matter how fast we moved, the sound of those footsteps kept getting closer. It was like being hunted by our own shadows. Every step we took echoed back as us by those same empty, soulless replicas. We ran like our lives depended on it, because they did. My lungs burned and my legs felt like they could give out at any moment, but the thought of those things, our twisted copies, driving us forward was stronger than the pain. Suddenly, Laura tripped and fell hard to the ground, the impact knocking the wind out of her. "Laura!" Becky screamed, skidding to a halt. Isaac and I turned just in time to see Laura's double reaching her, its hand outstretched. I watched in horror as it grabbed Laura's arm. For a split second, Laura's eyes began to lose their color, turning dull and lifeless. At the same time, the hollow eyes of her double started to gain a spark of life, becoming clearer, more human. "No!" I shouted, rushing forward. I grabbed Laura's other arm and yanked her away from the doppelganger's grasp. She gasped, her eyes still cloudy, but I could still see a flicker of recognition as she looked at me. "They're trying to replace us," I realized, my voice trembling with fear. "If they touch us, they'll take over." Isaac's face went pale as he understood what had just happened. "Keep moving," he urged, pulling Becky to her feet. I wrapped my arm around Laura's waist and helped her up, and we all started running again, pushing ourselves to the limit. The forest blurred around me as we ran, the only thought in my mind being to escape. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glint of something familiar. There, partially hidden among the branches, was the same old mirror we found near our campsite that morning. Its cracked, distorted surface seemed to shimmer ominously in the fading light. This was not the time to think about it. We kept running. But I soon noticed something strange. Everything looked the same. The same trees, the same rocks, the same shadows, just like we were running in circles. That mirror appeared again, this time partially hidden in a bush. That's when the realization struck me. The copies, the reflections, the mirror, it was all connected. "Wait!" I shouted, coming to an abrupt halt. The others stumbled to a stop, looking extremely confused as I ran to the bush and pulled the mirror out. "What the heck? We don't have time for this!" Isaac yelled, panting heavily. The doubles were still hot on our heels. I could see their figures flitting behind the bushes. "This mirror's always here. It's the source," I explained quickly. "The copies look exactly like us because they're our reflection brought to life by this mirror." Without wasting another second, I slammed it down on a nearby rock. The glass shattered into countless pieces, its fragments scattering across the forest floor. The effect was taken immediately. Behind us, those doppelgangers froze mid-air, their faces twisted in shock, and then, one by one, they disintegrated into thin air, as if they had never existed. We all stood there, breathless, unable to believe what we had just witnessed. It took us a while to gather ourselves and make our way back home. We had escaped, safe and sound, and we were grateful for that. However, even though we never encountered anything like that again, those memories still haunt me every time I look into a mirror, fearing that the reflection will somehow jump out and take my place.